creates the pathways through which it wants to move, or in which it wants to express itself. It's very important to begin to employ systems or to convert existing systems into ways of moving water which follows the law governing the flow of water, takes temperature into consideration, takes the alternating, pulsating movement of water into consideration, because this is a substance which is a living substance, and it cannot impart life unless it is itself alive. There's this constantly changing aspect of natural form, which is reflected in the seashells, reflected in the dynamics of the universe. It's this wall shape. Nature is not workings, there's not wheels and wheels, but they're whorls and whorls. There's one spiral moving inside another spiral as energy, because energy, it must be remembered, is always primary, and physical form is the secondary effect. We have to turn this around in our heads and remember that energy is primary, that nothing can appear in the physical until it has been first conceived of energetically, and the formation of anything physical is the concentration of the image until the physical form is realized. And this is one of the things that Viktor Schauberger stated on many occasions, that energy is primary and physical form is the secondary effect. This concentration of higher energies, immaterial energies, gradually coalesce into more energies of a lower frequency, finally having the physical effect in the physical form. Analogously, we might say that the energies coming from the sun, the X-ray energies and the high-frequency energies of the sun, impinge on the Earth's atmosphere, and they cause thermal variations, they cause the movement of winds, which is a lower form of energy than the energy coming from the sun. And these winds blow around the planet, and on the surface of the planet are the oceans, and the winds impinge on the water, which is a more dense medium than the air, and waves are created. And finally, on the shore, these waves create ripples on the sand, which is the very densest of the medium. And so you can see how the higher energies of the sun are actually responsible for the ripples on the ocean floor. So the ultimate effect, if we're talking purely energetically, so to speak, is that we've had three levels of energy demodulation, so to speak, from the sun to the air to the water, and finally the physical form, the ripples on the sand, have been created. The whole process of nature's evolution, or her workings, are put back to front, because things are taken as a cause when in fact they are an effect, and they are an effect in a long series of causes and effects. And what we are seeing around the world today in terms of the treatment of water and the forests are the massive inundations in China, in Bangladesh, and other places in the world which are due to deforestation. What happens here is related again to this peculiar anomaly state of water. Viktor described a movement of temperature which from any higher temperature down towards 4 degrees as being what he called a positive temperature gradient. And a negative temperature gradient was a temperature which moved up in the opposite direction, from 4 degrees either down or upwards, anyway away from 4 degrees, which was the condition of temperaturelessness or indifference, as Viktor called it. Now the temperature gradient plays an enormous role in the Earth's water balance, and it's something which is not really understood, and it's very important that it should be understood, because if it's not, we shall go on having the same series of drought, deluge, and these massive flooding and inundations which we're experiencing at the moment. Now water has to be handled with great sensitivity. It is a substance which is alive. It has to be treated as something alive. Therefore, it should not be exposed to excess heat. It should not be exposed to excess pressure. All those things we know in our human body are destructive. And the same thing applies to water. As long as water is able to flow in vortices down a river, and to have a movement, a flowing sort of waltzing movement to left and right as it spirals around one bend in one way and one the other, then it's able to generate these cooling vortices. And this always, no matter what the external conditions, or at least to a certain extent, no matter what the external conditions, the water is able to cool itself towards its all-important state of temperaturelessness, which is 4 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, with many of the practices, hydraulic practices, river engineering practices and so on, water is forced and confined to flow in straight channels, and these channels are really like a straitjacket on water. It stops its free movement. It's not able to move, it's not able to waltz from left to right. All its ability to generate these vortices is removed from it, and as a living substance it becomes diseased. And when forced to move in such or be conducted in such a way, then because it can't cool itself, it warms up, and the oxygen content becomes aggressive and fosters the development of parasitic life forms, bacteria and so on, because the water has become too warm. And its energy, like we have in our body, we have energies which enhance our immune system. When those become depleted, then we get sick. And the same thing happens to water. And the greatest and most sensitive care must be taken of water if it is to fulfill its functions, which is to support life. Because life without water is unthinkable. And one of the greatest fallacies in economic theory today is, or not fallacies, but sort of mistaken thinking, is that the world can continue to move, to grow in its materialistic way on the assumption that there can be no limit to quantitative growth. Of course there must be, because this planet is finite, and there's a finite number of artifacts or finite materials, raw materials. When rain falls onto the earth, the rain has a certain temperature. The earth, in order to absorb the rain, must have a cooler temperature. This is a positive temperature gradient, because we are going from a hotter to a cooler temperature through the ground. As long as the ground is cooler than the incident rain, the water will infiltrate, and that really happens under conditions of healthy forest or healthy vegetation, which cools the ground. That means the water is absorbed, and in forestry conditions 85% of the water that falls will be absorbed by the ground and won't be released, for instance, till 2 or 3 days after, even if it's heavy rain. Now if we have removed the trees, if the ground has been warmed up, then we have the existence of a negative temperature gradient from the atmosphere into the ground, in that the rain is cooler but the receiving ground is warmer, and as a result the water will not penetrate but run sideways. Like you put a drop of water on an electric hot plate, it skitters sideways and steams. And this steaming is the same thing that happens to the water, which has fallen on the ground under a negative temperature gradient. In that because it is not absorbed, much larger areas of water are exposed to the sun, and there's a much faster and abnormal rate of evaporation, which means that a very large amount of water is returned to the atmosphere far too quickly. And as a result of that, you have large agglomerations of water here, no water there, deluges here, drought there. And that is all because the water balance has been disrupted by and large by humankind's activities in forestry and agriculture and water resources management. And we are paying the price for that now, and there is only one solution, and that is to reforest as fast as possible, because then the water will be allowed to enter into the aquifer systems underground. A lot of carbon dioxide will be absorbed in the photosynthetic process. The climate will be cooled and the water balance regulated, and then we can expect to have after that more even and regular climatic patterns than we are experiencing today. And all this